Hi, I'm Stephen Reich from the PokePress PR and Studios in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm on the phone with Ralph Schuckett, who was involved for much of the first 8 seasons of the Pokemon TV show, but in particular he did the dub scores for the first 3 Pokemon movies. But before we get into that, Ralph, first of all, how did you get into music? Growing up, did you play any instruments, or how did that work out?
Well, my parents played a lot of music in the house, and we had a piano, and I have an older sister who listened to music pretty much 24/7. So I was exposed to all different kinds of music, and I'm told that even when I was, I don't know, a toddler or maybe a year and a half, 2 years old, I would sit in front of the stereo and just kind of rock back and forth to the music. So I started messing around with the piano. My parents found me piano teachers, and I took lessons for a few very short periods, and none of the teachers, I was totally bored and didn't enjoy it at all, but I liked to sit at the piano and make up my own stuff. So I just messed around by myself, and then when I got into high school, there were other musicians who went to school with me, and they knew that I played a little, and so they asked me to join their bands. So I was in I think 3 or 4 different bands when I was in high school. And that's when I really started sort of taking notice of my playing and of songwriting and stuff like that. I had always enjoyed music, and I had always made up music and heard it in my head, but that was the first time I really sort of did anything with it. And I started to listen to music in a more analytical way, so I could figure out what everyone was doing whose music I liked. So I could try and figure out how to play what they were playing. And I would take apart the arrangements, and I'd focus on, what's the bass player doing? What's the drummer doing? What's the guitar player doing? And I really just trained my ear, I guess. I trained myself, and so that I could eventually pick out chords and pick out melodies and all these different parts. And then I started writing music for my bands, or if we were doing covers, I ended up being the arranger kind of the covers, because I had all these ideas on how to do them, and the other guys were just pretty much copying the record. And so I started, suggesting, why don't you play this, and then, I'll play this part, and the drums will do this. And so I always had kind of a composer-arranger point of view.
And then once you got out of high school, graduated, you started to become a professional musician. What was that like?
Well, it was amazing. I was still playing in various bands, and the caliber of the bands kept improving. And a girl I went to high school with told me about this band that was signed to Elektra Records, a band called Clear Light. And they were produced by the same guy who produced The Doors and Janis Joplin, this guy Paul Rothchild, and they were signed to the same label as The Doors, and they were looking for another guy because their guitar player had quit, and they'd never thought about a keyboard player, but my ex-girlfriend kind of talked them into auditioning me, and so I went to audition for Clear Light, and they liked me, and I joined the band. And from then it was sort of a snowball, because then I got to learn more about what it was like being a professional and being in a recording studio and, writing songs and touring. And I just would meet people. It wasn't even at the beginning really deliberate networking. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I'd meet all these various people who were in the business. And one thing sort of led to another, and eventually, I guess, from word of mouth, I started getting recommended to play on recording sessions, play keyboards, piano, or organ. And the most prominent ones at that time were, I was in Carole King's band, and I played with her and James Taylor for about 2 or 3 years. And I think I did 3 tours with them, 2 of the United States and 1 of Europe, and then, the people in those band who played with them were on a much higher level. And then they got me gigs, and they recommended me for other things. And, working with Carole King and James Taylor, these two amazing songwriters, I just learned so much from them, and I had so much concert experience, and, it just snowballed. And then, I guess in 1972, I can't even remember. I moved to New York in 1972. I was living in Los Angeles where I grew up, and I moved to New York in 1972. And I didn't really know anybody. I had one friend who was a musician. He introduced me to a bunch of people, and then I started all of a sudden. I joined his band, and then all of a sudden I started playing on a lot of record dates in New York, and I just got busier and busier, and I had a profession as a composer.
And one of the people you met along the way was a man that a name that should be pretty familiar to frequent listeners is John Siegler. Now, how did you meet him?
Well, actually, John Siegler, when I moved to New York, he grew up in the same town as my one friend, and which is Great Neck, New York. And there's just, I don't know, tons of well-known musicians and record executives who grew up in Great Neck. So I met John, and John was in the band that my friend was Moogie Klingman, and the band was called Moogie and the Rhythm Kings. John was the bass player, and John and I were roommates, and we got to be best friends. And then the person actually that I met was John Leffler, who somebody recommended me to him, and he was a songwriter, and he produced TV commercials. And he and I were writing partners. And he was the one who originally was the contact to do Pokemon. And at that time, I had just moved back to L.A., and so he needed another, John Leffler was looking for another partner to co-produce with and co-write with, and I recommended John Siegler. And he and John Siegler ended up having a long and fruitful relationship as songwriters, co-producers. And that's how John Siegler got involved in Pokemon as a music supervisor and as a collaborator with John Leffler. But John Leffler was the guy who first, got us the work. I can't remember how he did it, but he met somebody at Four Kids Productions, and he ended up being a music supervisor for all their shows, and the first one was Pokemon. So when he called me, I guess it was probably about a year before the movie, so it must have been maybe 1998.
Yeah, 98 would have been a year, because the movie debuted in U.S. theaters in 1999.
Yeah, so he called me and asked me if I wanted to do the music for this new TV show he was working on called Pokemon. And he said, I'm kind of embarrassed to ask you this, though, because I don't have a budget, but it's a tremendous opportunity for you. And, you could really pretty much write whatever music you wanted, and it's great experience, and it's great exposure, and you'll get royalties from it, but I can't pay you anything up front. And at the time, I had a young family, and I just couldn't afford to do any work for free, even though the back end, meaning the performance royalties, ended up being a huge financial success. It was a big gamble. I mean, John and John Siegler and nobody involved, none of the music people involved with the show had any idea that it would be as big as it was. So I turned it down, and I recommended a couple other people for it, and they ended up doing the music for the TV show. And then when they decided to make a movie, for some reason, so Norman Grossfeld, who is the head writer and producer of all the Pokemon stuff and many other Four Kids productions, John Leffler called me, and it turned out that Norman didn't think the other two composers music was cinematic enough. And I'm not sure what he meant by that because they're both really great composers, but he wasn't satisfied with what they did, so he didn't want them to do the movie. And the guy had, I don't know, maybe 100 CDs of well-known film composers on his desk, and he was trying to figure out which one to hire, and John Loeffler talked me up in a big way and said, you know, this guy Ralph is really great, and he'll just kill it, and you'll love him, and he's, you know. But I didn't really have much film music to speak of. John and I had done a lot of music for television, and we'd written theme songs to a couple of TV shows, but there was no serious orchestral action and emotional music on my reel. So Norman said, well, do you mind, how about if I give you a 10-minute cue and you write 10 minutes of music for it, and I can't pay you, but it's your audition, and then if I like it, I'll hire you. So that I was prepared to do, and Norman loved it, so I became, with John Loeffler, the composer of the movie.
So you had been signed on to do, you know, the dub score of the first movie, and basically, you know, you had to come up with an overall style for it, and as well as a couple character themes. Where did those come from?
Well, John had seen the movie probably 10 or 12 times before I did, so he had a lot of thoughts about it. And so I flew to New York to spot the movie with Norman Grossfeld and John Loeffler. And so we watched the movie, and every time there was a new character, Norman would stop the movie and he'd explain, this character needs a theme, and this is sort of the personality of this character. And so he would explain kind of what he wanted. And some of the stuff he didn't have an opinion about. He would just say, this guy needs a theme. You know, give me something. I'm not sure what I want. And so we went through the whole movie, and there were also a couple of themes that were like, I think there was a battle theme, and there's like a losing battle theme and a winning battle theme, and there were some various themes for different types of action. So then John Loeffler and I watched the movie a few times, and then we just sat in a room and we came up with these themes that Norman had, you know, requested, and then we played them for him, and he liked them, and then the next step was for me to orchestrate the movie for an orchestra. And it was a real harrowing time because there was very little time to do it. 4Kids Productions, all their shows, they do very quickly. And so when it gets down to doing the music, which is the last thing they do, there's no time, you know. So it was a big kind of high-pressure situation, and John sort of locked me in this room at Rave Music, which was John's company, and I had all these themes, and I had a video of the movie, and with Norman we spotted every cue, and a cue is a certain sequence in the movie, and so then I took the themes and I started orchestrating the music with a computer doing it on MIDI. I had several MIDI keyboards, and I did a mock-up score, and every time I finished a clump of cues, John and I would play them for Norman, and he might have a rewrite idea, but most of them he just said, okay, I like that. And I think it was about 6 weeks that I had, and I had to hire, I had never done music of that length and scope, so I was kind of pretty innocent as to the procedure. And after I got maybe halfway through, after the third week, it became very apparent that I didn't have time to orchestrate the entire movie. So we had to hire some orchestrators / composers / programmers to help me complete the movie. And so basically they listened to my style, which was based on Norman Grossfeld's taste, really, what he was looking for that John and I interpreted. Because we would bring him a cue, And he'd say, no, I'm not getting an emotional thrill, or I'm not getting the pathos in this scene. I'm not getting the feeling of triumph. It's boring. It's not action. A lot of the action music we wrote had, really cool contemporary drum beats and synthesizers and a lot of what contemporary action movie was at the time and still is. But Norman didn't want that. He wanted classical, almost like overly emotional music, let's say, that was written like films from the 30s and 40s, where the music is just really, really emotional, and many people in contemporary film writing would think it was corny and out of date. But Norman really wanted that type of feeling. So after couple of weeks of working with Norman, finally I got what he was looking for, and then I got a couple of orchestrators in to help me, and I played them the cues that were approved by Norman, so they could see what the style was, and then I put them to work. And I'd map out a cue, I'd map out the themes, I'd do sort of a broad strokes arrangement. And they did all the filling in. They made it sound really good because they were all great orchestrators. They were all very, very well schooled and classically trained and had a lot of experience doing films. And then we did the orchestral date, and it was a success. The entire movie is not a live orchestra. It's probably about half and half. Half of the music is done with MIDI samples, orchestral samples, and the other half is done with a live orchestra, because there was just no budget to do the entire score and no time to do the entire score for a live orchestra. So the whole thing was kind of a roller coaster ride where I didn't get any sleep for 6 weeks, and it was a real rush. But at the same time, it was really exciting. It was kind of anxiety provoking, but at the same time, it was a good challenge and an educational experience. And then when all the music was done, then we did the final mix of the film, and the film came out. And by that time, the show was huge, which none of us expected. In fact, there wouldn't have been a movie if the show hadn't been successful. It was just a really big thing, and John Loeffler and I went to the premiere in L.A. at the Grauman's Chinese Theater, and it was packed, and it was a big deal, and there was a lot of press, and the Pokemon movie ended up being an enormously popular, successful feature film.
And since the first movie was, very successful, obviously they brought over the next movie, 2000, the following year. How did you get contacted to come on again for that one?
Well, just, we had a good thing going for the first one, so, Norman decided to have us do the second one. And I was the sole composer on that one because John Loeffler he's kind of a broad strokes, overview guy. He gets really bored with the details. He's always got several projects going, and so he's more of he plays an executive producer role. And so I became the only composer because John didn't really have time to sit there with me and go to every spotting meeting and have every meeting with Norman.
So you had been chosen, and you were going to do the score for the second movie. First of all, what was the overall sort of feel you're going for? It definitely, to me, has a very maritime feel. How did you go about doing that in the score?
Well, Norman wanted... I don't even think the word maritime or nautical or, ocean, I don't even think that particular description was ever given, although obviously the character and most of the action takes place on the ocean. Norman wanted a theme that was kind of a timeless, almost like a folk melody, meaning it wasn't from any particular period of time. And the whole thing was the legend. I guess Lugio, if I remember correctly, was a legendary character at first.
Yeah, more so than like the movies always focus on legendary Pokemon, but Lugia specifically had, unlike the first movie, an actual legend associated with it.
Right. So Norma wanted the legend theme, kind of like a simple, timeless, heroic theme that's almost like a folk melody or like an Irish folk song. To be honest, I can't even remember the entire theme, but if I remember correctly, it's pentatonic music, meaning there's only 5 notes in the scale. And if you listen to a lot of ancient Irish music, and the same is true of pretty much native music from all over the world, whether it be Native Americans or Africans or Asians, it's all pentatonic music. So that's what that theme ended up being. And so it has sort of a primitive feeling, too, which goes along with the ancient Irish tribes and goes along with the timelessness and the sort of legendary status of Lugia. And so that was kind of what our direction was. And so I wrote the theme. I can't remember, but John Leffler might have written that theme with me. I think he did.
And yeah, and that theme is used, throughout the movie. And obviously, it starts at the beginning, comes in at various points, and it sort of culminates in the end, in that big scene where the world is set back into balance. And then in the end credits, you have Donna Summer doing The Power of One, which borrows, just to be clear, the melody came from the score and then was brought into the Power of One song at the end. What was that like, hearing it transformed like that into an actual vocal song? What was that like?
I don't remember the actual moment that I heard it, so I don't remember my first reaction, but I'm sure I loved it. I mean, I'm a big Donna Summer fan. I probably, to be honest, I probably thought, hey, we could have written a song as good as that or better or something, because we were, John and I were very competitive. We wanted to do everything. So, but there just was no time, At that time in my life, I was kind of like maybe sort of arrogant. So, but to be honest, I don't remember. That's just a guess. Now I'm a lot humbler.
And you did end up doing one more movie score. It was the third movie, Spell of the Unknown, and it's maybe the score there isn't quite as famous. It was never released fully on CD or anything. But what was the sort of the atmosphere for that one?
Well, that one, the main character was a little girl, and so the sort of the atmosphere of a lot of the cues had that in mind. So it was a little more, for lack of a better word, romantic and feminine, I guess. So the overall kind of complexion of the melodies and the way they were treated might have been a little softer and less dissonant. But then she got angry, and if I remember correctly, she was quite a formidable Pokemon, a Pokemon master, that's what they're called. And so, when it came time to do the battles, she was no longer, it was no longer a little girl music. It was more just, full on battle music.
And so one of the big plot details about the movie is that the girl, her father, has vanished for most of the film. And so basically what happens is that this other Pokemon, the legendary Entei, kind of appears, and there's sort of a relationship, sort of a surrogate father there. How does that play into the music?
Entei was sort of he sort of took the place of her father in that he protected her and he watched over her. And he was very courageous, but he was kind of like the peaceful warrior. So the music was supposed to reflect that, and it had sort of almost a military kind of a feeling. So he was her surrogate father, and then eventually when she found her father, oh man, the details, but there's a really dramatic scene towards the end where Entei is battling somebody and he's really suffering, but he's hanging in there with tremendous courage and strength, and all to protect the little girl character. I can't remember her name. And so that music is very, very emotional, but it incorporates his sort of heroic military theme within the emotion of the struggle that he's going through.
All right, and of course the other major character is, you could say collectively, is the unknown, these symbol-shaped Pokemon that look like letters. They're more mysterious. What was sort of the instrumentation choices for those?
Well, the instrumentation actually I don't think was any different. I think for all three movies, the instrumentation for most of the cues was pretty traditional orchestral instruments, if I'm not mistaken. Although the third movie, we were allowed to, there's a couple of cues that have more contemporary kind of electronica drum tracks and stuff. So the instrumentation generally was not particularly different, but the unknown music is very weird and sort of eerie sounding. It's almost like music from a horror movie or a mystery in, let's say, the 40s, or the 30s or 40s, in that it's harmonically kind of advanced and complex, as opposed to 99% of contemporary music, if not 100% of it, is not harmonically complex. You know, in fact, nowadays the hit songs have maybe 3 chords, if that many. So my music in that movie is eerie in a classic traditional filmic way, rather than having strange electronic sounds or sound design create the eeriness. So it's all in the harmony and the melodies of the unknown themes and whatever they happen to be doing at the time.
And after the third movie, they started using the Japanese scores for the remaining films. However, were you still involved in the series in any way? Did you work on the TV show at all?
I did a little composing for the TV show for specific cues for which they didn't have already existing music. But what was great for me was that they started using the film music in the TV show, and because usually a composer makes more money from the television performances, the lion's share of our income it's called performance royalties when one of our shows is on.
So even though you stopped being directly involved as much as you were in the early part after the third movie, you still had definitely an impact on the series going forward, which is really great. So since then you've sort of moved on, and now you actually teach music, instruments as well as compositional techniques. What's that like?
Oh, it's great. I love it. I started teaching about 5 years ago. I'm not formally trained myself. I didn't go to music school. I didn't take classical harmony and theory lessons, but I have done a lot of studying of music scores and listening to the pieces on my own. And I have a lot of friends who are wonderful orchestrators and arrangers who have given me some tips. But with my students, basically what I do is a student comes in, and whatever the student, or if it's a child, the student's parents want them to learn, I will teach it. So I don't have a specific method, but I have most of my students are adults, and most of them are either film composers or TV composers, or they are people in rock bands, or they're singer-songwriters, or they're wannabe film composers. so they need to learn really fast because they want to further their careers and they have jobs or they want to get jobs. So I try to consolidate all the stuff I've learned in 40 years of experience into what would be useful to them at the time. Because when you learn harmony and theory and classical orchestration, you spend years on a lot of stuff that you would never get hired for because it's dated sounding. And so what I have to teach him is not that sophisticated. And I don't waste time. I'm not like a go-by-the-book person because I didn't learn by the book. So I try and encapsulate all my knowledge into whatever they happen to need at the time. And some of them have been with me since I started teaching because they like to learn. And some of them, most of them, I'll teach them for a few months and then they don't need me anymore because I've taught them a lot of tricks that I've learned, and then I also teach them how to teach themselves.
And, if folks are interested in your teaching and they happen to live in the LA area, you're actually listed on a couple of websites where they can possibly contact you. What are those?
Yeah, well, my website isn't ready yet, so, and eventually what I'm doing is I'm going to be set up for online lessons, and I'm going to have some lessons for free on YouTube, but I'm still working on all that. So the best way to reach me would be, there are two websites that I'm registered with. One is called privatelessons.com, and the other one is called getlessons.com. And so I'm one of the teachers on their roster, and there's contact information for me at both of those places.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ralph. It's been great having you on and giving us some really, really neat information. Thank
you. I really enjoyed it, and working on the Pokemon stuff and on all the 4Kids shows on the air. It's sort of been my main gig up until about 3 years ago. So it's very dear to me, and so I like to talk about it.
All right. Well, this has been Stephen Reich from the PokePress PRN Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, on the phone with Ralph Schuckett, who was involved with quite a bit of the Pokemon dub, but specifically he did the scores for the first 3 movies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, Stephen here. One other thing I wanted you to know is that although the final interview is about 30 minutes long, we actually recorded over an hour of audio. For the most part, the stuff that was cut isn't noteworthy, but there are a few pieces I'd like to share.
My older sister was a big fan of blues and R&B and jazz, and she was about 10, 11 years older than I was. And so when I was, I guess, 7 maybe, she was in college, and she just used to indoctrinate me, about the music she liked, and she was really highly opinionated, and she would recommend stuff to me, or I would listen to records that she had around the house, and she would say, "No, this is cool, this isn't cool," and she also took me to clubs to see bands, but just I saw all these amazing people play, and I was in a small club in the front row, so I was practically on top of them, and I got to see everything they did, and I heard everything they did, and it just blew me away. It was so amazing and spectacular and inspiring that it sort of made me take music more seriously. And Norman Grossfeld was a musician in a past life. He played the trumpet, and he knew a lot about music, and he was very specific about certain types of things that he wanted, which was really great because it taught me. It was like going to music school. It was like going to school for film scoring. But by the end of the movie, I knew what Norman wanted, and I learned a lot from all those orchestrators, and they were also copyists, which means at the time of the first movie, the parts for every separate player in the orchestra, each one had to have their own part. So I would write the score on a huge piece, tablet of huge paper that had all the instruments on it, and then there was what is called a copyist, who basically by hand copies what I have on the score for the individual parts of every musician. And so that's what these guys did after, once all the cues had been finished and approved in their MIDI form. And interestingly enough, maybe 75% of contemporary pop songs are pentatonic.
To announce this next performer. He's been a very, very long time friend of Todd's, and actually he was in one of the first boy bands called Utopia. Ralph Schuckett!
Yeah. Thank you. Let's see here. So first of all, I'm going to sing a song, but first of all, I'm going to talk because I like to talk and you're a captive audience. So lock the doors, please. So the way I got here, actually, I want to thank Ed Victor for telling me about this event, because that's how I found out about it. Actually, I should thank my friend Cliff, who you don't know, but he's a huge Todd fan. And I've been friends with Cliff for about, 6 or 7 years. And during that time, he always has kept up with everything Todd's done. And it's kind of like when Todd, takes a leak, Cliff calls me. And he always calls me, he says, "Hey man, Todd's going on tour, you gotta get that gig, And I've always been busy and had other commitments and stuff. And so one day Cliff called me and said, Todd's going on the Wizard tour. And I happened to be out of work. It was sort of like I had this one job composing music for television for about, 20 years. And it was 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. It was just like this music making machine, which I couldn't have done this job without having been in Utopia, because all the Utopian music was so strange, and there was so many changes and time signatures and key changes and stuff like that it really prepared me for writing music for cartoons. I did. And anyway, so Cliff called, and so I had that job, and then it was kind of like driving 90 miles an hour into a brick wall. One day I got a call, and all of a sudden the company was out of business, and so I didn't have a job. It was a really fun job, and there was no pressure, no politics, and I got to do pretty much whatever I wanted. So I let Cliff, I waited about 3 weeks. Cliff kept calling me and saying, go on the road with Todd, man, you should be on that tour, you played on that. So finally I called Eric, and I said, I'd like to play on the tour, and he said, if you would have called 3 weeks ago, you would have had the gig. But then he called me a few weeks later, and Roger Powell, who's a great keyboard player, wonderful person, as are all the Utopian guys. I guess Roger had to go back to work. He was on sick leave, and he used up like 4 years of sick leave on the tour. So they called me, and I took over. And that sort of like reintroduced me to Todd and to the whole Todd experience. Although I will say that I've always been a Todd fan. I'm not brown-nosing him or anything. No, I've always been thrilled by Todd's music, and I've bought every record when it came out and thoroughly enjoyed it, although I must say, in all truth, I like Todd's records better than Utopia's records. But I feel so lucky to have had a chance to be in his band. So anyway, God, does anyone have some water? Oh, thank you. All right, so so I got to know Todd again on that tour, and lo and behold, you know, not only was I loving the music, but Todd had turned into a really kind and compassionate human being. I mean, you know, with your indulgence, I don't even know if Todd's in here, but I'm going to sort of like roast you for a while.
All right.
Actually, that would be a terrific theme for one of these things. Roasting Todd.
I think Dole did that.
Oh, you already did that? Who did? Oh, no. Okay. All right.
Go all night. Just
Okay.
throw money.
So, let me tell you. So anyway, yeah. So, like for the first time I met Todd, I think it was on the Wizard sessions, and I walked up to him and I said, "Hey Todd, where are you from?" And he said, "Who cares?" and walked away. And I was a very shy, self-effacing person at the time, you know. So I was just, you know, like really devastated. But you know, Todd is really something. You know, the way he's. Anyway, I'm not gonna kiss his ass or anything. Let me tell you about this song. So this song, I wrote this song about 20 or 25 years ago. My cousin, who's an actress, called me up and she said she was doing a play and she thought the play could use some music. And the play was called Kingdom of Earth, and it's by Tennessee Williams. It's one of his lesser known plays. You know, y'all know who Tennessee Williams is? So, so she said, so she dropped the play off to me, and she said, you know, I'm gonna just read the play and let me know what you think. And I read the play, and all of a sudden I got this kind of a channel from who knows where, which songwriters are always talking about that kind of thing, like where they get their ideas. It's usually when they're not trying to write a song, but they just kind of get visited by these ideas. So I whooped off this song. It was a really long song, and I wrote it in like, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half. I was really excited, and I called her on the phone, and I said, I got this song, listen to this, and I sang it to her over the phone, and she said, well, you know, that's a beautiful song, but, you know, I was kind of, what we sort of had in mind was, what do you call that thing, like when somebody plays guitar, and they have this thing on their finger, and they go like this, you know? We just needed a few of those. I said, slide guitar, and she said, yeah, we just needed some of those kind of licks, you know, for transition. So I threw this, I forgot about the song. It was on my computer. I think I made a piano demo of it, and I totally forgot about it. And then about, I don't know, 10 years ago, I was going through my old songs, which I have a lot of unfinished stuff, and I found this song, and I thought it sounded really good, but I didn't want to. It was all about the play, and at first I just started tweaking some of it, like it wasn't rhyming properly, and I ended up rewriting the song. Now it has nothing to do with the play except the title is the title of the play. So I'm going to do it for you, and this is like a premiere performance. And world premiere for me too. I've never performed this song. And you know, actually, I haven't sang and played in a really long time, so.
Family, come on.
No, but I can't even, and I don't like to stand up when I play. It's kind of uncomfortable.
You want to share?
So no. I'm gonna just sing it a cappella, and with your patience. And it's a long song. It's a story song, and it's absolutely nothing about it is Utopia-esque or Todd-esque. It's kind of like, I like a lot of roots music and bluegrass and blues and stuff like that. I'm really an Americana fan. And so that's kind of what influenced the song. So it's kind of a story song where it's a very simple song and it tells a story. And you know, like the old English troubadours or Scottish, Irish troubadours would go around from town to town and sing these stories. And that's kind of like what my influence in writing the song was. But I need the lyrics. So, of course I need my glasses too, so I'm really prepared here, guys. Really, I'm very professional, usually. Okay.
Simple water.
What? This song will take all night. Let's get the key. So
That's how I would do it.
So this is the song. I need some more water. You know, this reminds me of a story.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Ralph Schuckett.
There was a guy named Cheyenne Schatz who used to live in LA in the 60s. And he had he was a one-man band. And he had like a VW van or something. It was with amazing psychedelic pictures all over it in all different colors. And his whole bit was setting up. And so he'd get out of his van and he'd set up his stuff, and he was just so funny setting it up. People were in hysterics, you know, and he had all this, I don't know, like pedals connected to weird things. It was like a Rube Goldberg kind of setup, and he had several instruments, harmonicas, and all this stuff, and a drum kit. And he spent like 45 minutes setting up, but during which he was like saying funny things. And then when he was finally set up, he said, "Thank you, good night." And so this is kind of like that. Okay. Name of this song is Kingdom of Earth. Want to get that key? Okay. All right. Oh, the river is wild, running dark like blood. Hear the cruel wind howling as we struggle in the mud. As the storm clouds rumble like a ghostly curse, a sharecropper's shovel carves a rectangle in the dirt. In a bastard's rage, humble coolie stands. He guards his precious birthright, his meager speck of land. He was born in shame, had to fight for all he's worth, and he's weathered many a storm in this kingdom of earth. Let the river rise, let the rain come down, let it wash away the suffering from this ground. A fire burns, but the night grows cold. God save us from the darkness in our souls. Humble never met his father, but he saw him once or twice, with hair, with skin as pale as winter and eyes as cold as ice. His young mother perished with his violent birth. He was sentenced to hard labor in this kingdom of earth. Let the river rise, let the rain come down, down. Let it wash away the suffering from this ground. A fire burns, but the night grows cold. God save us from the darkness in our souls. Boom, boom, boom. This is the bass thing. Guitar thing. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, lyrics, where are they? Oh yeah. Yonder comes half-brother Tom and his beautiful bride, whose marriage of convenience is a long and loveless ride. Tom's proud family surname is a crown he wears, like his Eastern education and his slick city airs. He presents a sheaf of papers with a government seal from low men in high places, now richer from the deal. He possesses every acre as far as the eyes can see. Oh yeah. Now he must have he must have this last parcel to achieve his victory. Now I guess there's kind of a solo down and down, 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 oh, the river is wild with murder and lust. It swells like desire with a vengeance harsh but just. Two brothers battle fiercely, and the darker man survives. Oh yeah, as the clouds rain down their fury from an angry southern sky. Where are we? Oh. Humble's prayers have been answered. and his flesh is saved. His soul will seek forgiveness. No, redemption. Something. His soul will seek redemption when it rises from his grave. And he shelters that sweet woman with a tender. Oh, Jesus. Now he shelters that sweet woman with a tender, reverent love. Oh, reverent love, as deep as the river, as old as this black mud. Now a new autumn sparkles with the dew of morning light from a woman's gracious mercy and a man's stubborn pride. And they plant this one intention for each new baby's birth. Please, God, yeah, let our children bring compassion to this kingdom of earth. Boom, 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 boom,
just the other night, I had a vision in the middle of a daydream. In a place I'd never been before, I couldn't tell if I was still awake or sleeping. I saw so many things I barely recognized. I thought that I was lost, but then I saw you. And I knew that you better not before. But I swear that I knew you in another life. And I knew I knew you right now. And I couldn't be dreaming. But I swear that I knew you in another life. Certain things affect me certain ways, and this isn't just the first time that it's crossed my mind. Something happens and the crystal clears, and you begin to recognize all of the little signs. I wish that I could place every little gesture, but it really doesn't matter, 'cause we'll never know. Thank you.